They first hit the field in the heat of battle back in 1894. The series shut down in 2011 when Texas A&M moved on to the SEC. We bring in Aaron Torres of Fox Sports to talk up what possibly could be a renewed rivalry with the Aggies taking on the Longhorns, because there's been some recent talk, and Aaron wrote an article for Outkick the Coverage to give his perspective on what the series could possibly mean for both schools. Aaron, thanks so much for joining us.
Mark, as always, the pleasure's mine, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, this is a good discussion right here, because this is a long storied rivalry that once was and is dead currently, but there's been some rumblings about renewing conflicts between the two Texas schools. So your thoughts concerning each school's perspective on this rivalry right now, or what could be. And of course, Texas for so long was the big brother to the little brother A&M, but that's not necessarily the case right now.
Yeah, little brother moved out on his own, and it turns out he's got a penthouse right in the downtown. The ladies are hanging out there on the weekends, and things have changed quite a bit. But honestly, the article, as you referenced, really just talks about basically what I just said, is that when the two programs last played on the field, 2011, Texas wasn't totally the Texas that they were probably in the middle part of the last decade, but we're still one of the 2 or 3 elite programs in college football. Since then, Texas A&M has gone to the SEC. They've hired Kevin Sumlin. Obviously, they've had a Heisman Trophy winner in Johnny Manziel, and they've just really kind of, for lack of a better term, rebranded themselves. And when you combine kind of all the variables, I just think that when you talk about these two programs in the state of 2015, A&M has kind of surpassed Texas. And that's not to say that it's going to be that way forever, but right now, A&M is the cooler program with the cooler style and the cooler coach, and that's really where the article was based in, was just the idea that 4 or 5 years ago, A&M may have needed Texas, but right now, if anything, Texas needs Texas A&M because, for all the variables I mentioned, Texas A&M is, as of right now, surpassed them.
Yeah, things have changed very quickly. As you mentioned, Texas A&M moves from the SEC or from the Big 12, and we're winning 7 or 8 football games a year. Then you bring in Kevin Sumlin, who's a hip coach. You bring in Johnny Manziel, and you go to the SEC, the most dominant football power in America, and the Chic Conference as well. And voila, you flip the script, and then Texas goes like 500 or barely over since last going to the national championship game, and this is where we stand right now. So is there immediate hope for Texas, do you think?
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of immediate hope. Charlie Strong there, it was a tough start to the season. Then he had a very nice kind of middle portion where he seemed to kind of get his footing in Austin and really had the team playing really well. Obviously, things didn't end the way that any Texas fan or any fan of any program would have wanted. They got blown out. I believe it was on Thanksgiving night against TCU to end the regular season, and then, of course, got embarrassed, basically, for lack of a better term, by Arkansas in that Texas Bowl. But, as you and I kind of talked about off the air, this sport is very cyclical. I think Charlie Strong has things going in the right direction, had to kick a lot of kids out of that program that weren't going to kind of play by his rules, for lack of a better term. And I think, he's got them going in the right direction. I think depth is an issue right now. Had a really good recruiting class this past cycle. And there's no reason to think that he can't turn it around in the long term. Again, I think kind of a lot of Texas fans may have misinterpreted that from the article. I was not saying that Texas football will be down forever. I'm just saying that right now A&M has surpassed them, but I think that there's a lot of reasons for Texas fans to be optimistic at this point.
Yeah, in addition to looking at your article, I looked through a stream of comments made from both sides, and it's interesting because basically the coaches have been saying, hey, this has to happen. We would like for this to happen, although Charlie Strong said fairly recently, I don't necessarily want to be walking into Kyle Field anytime soon. Maybe we're not quite ready for this game right now.
Yeah, no, and it's really funny you mentioned that because if you don't think that A&M fans have already taken that little quote and printed it up and put it on T-shirts, you're wrong. I actually had somebody send me a link basically telling me the T-shirts are available that say exactly that. We don't want to be walking into College Station right now. But, I think that it kind of speaks to – I think it speaks to more the importance of the rivalry for the two fan bases. I think it's very interesting to me because when Kevin Sumlin first kind of came into A&M, he was asked about it. This was, back in 2012, and he really said, look, I'm new here. We're new to the SEC. I got to worry about winning football games. And I think it really took a lot of A&M fans kind of aback, and they weren't very happy with him for it. And it's interesting how the narrative has changed. Most of the feedback I've gotten from A&M fans specifically on this article is that they tend to agree with me that, hey, we're in the SEC now. We got to worry about Auburn and Alabama and LSU and Ole Miss. Like if we play Texas, great. If not, we're going to be just fine, But I do think that the coaches smartly are playing to the fan bases. As I said, Kevin Sumlin very clearly flipped the script. Charlie Strong, obviously coming out with, for lack of better terms, strong words about the rivalry. But as you said, I was surprised he was so forthright with that quote, because in 2015, something like that is going to get picked up by the rival fan base and really played up. And that's exactly what happened. But it seems like both coaches are into the idea. I think a lot of it is posturing, and it's kind of a PR move, for lack of a better term. But I do think that there's some interesting elements there, and I do think that in a perfect world, both would like to play the game.
I'm surprised that Charlie Strong said it too.
Yeah.
I love him being genuine. Most coaches aren't. They stick to the script, and so I like the genuine quality of it. But it makes his program look weak at this point, and it also, even if they sign a contract today, they're not playing for a few years, so he has time to build up the program to be able to play Texas A&M. Texas A&M coming off 8-5 isn't exactly a giant killer at this point, or a top 10 program, at least specifically last year's team. It almost takes on, Aaron, see if you'll agree with me on this one, of what we've seen recently with Michigan State. Old line staunch Michigan supporters kind of still look down on Michigan State as being the little brother, i.e. what Mike Hart said years ago. Mark D'Antonio comes in, flips the script. It's cool to be a Michigan State Spartan. Michigan's been on hard times. Now it's the different dynamic is obviously they're forced together by the conference ties. But otherwise, you've got Michigan, who's dominated the series. Texas, let's see, 76-37 has always dominated the series, even recently before they stopped playing in 2011. But A&M's the cool place.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's a perfect analogy, and I think the analogy goes a step further, because the Michigan fans, like the Texas fans, are using history as their defense of, well, we're Michigan. We're, of course we're better than Michigan State. And like, that may be true, and like that may be true for your grandpa and your dad and even you and I, but it doesn't matter to 16-year-old kids. 16-year-old kids want to do what's cool now, and most importantly, and this goes for college football, college basketball, I'm sure it goes for other sports too, kids just want to go where they know that they can be put in the best position to go to the next level. And right now, you look at Michigan State's a perfect example, all the defensive guys that they have going into the league right now, and a lot of quarterbacks actually playing well. And I think it's interesting because it's kind of the same deal with A&M, where I don't remember the exact stats off the top of my head, but I think it was either last year or the year before was the first time in X number of years that no Texas Longhorn had been drafted. A&M, meanwhile, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I think 4 first-round picks since Sumlin's been there. Now, granted, they were all Mike Sherman recruits, but between Manziel, Jokel, Jake Matthews, Mike Evans, I mean, they're putting guys into the league, and even some of the defensive guys like Demontre Moore, maybe not necessarily, going as high in the draft, but they are getting guys drafted, and I think it's a great analogy because it plays up to exactly what is going on at Texas and Texas A&M is the Texas fans are holding on to this history that, it doesn't even date back that far. It might only be 5, 10, 15 years, but a 16-year-old kid doesn't remember 15 years ago. He cares about what happened last year and the year before, and seeing Manziel shake hands with, with Roger Goodell. I almost said Roger Tagliabue, but Roger Goodell on the podium in New York, and same with Mike Evans and the offensive tackles. And that's what 16-year-old kids care about. They don't care about Vince Young. They don't care about, in Michigan's case, Charles Woodson or anybody like that. And for guys like you and I, of course we remember those guys, but it doesn't matter to the kids that they're recruiting. And I think that was kind of one of the big bullet points that I tried to make in the article that I think people misunderstood was I'm not saying that over the last 150 years, Texas A&M is better than Texas. I'm saying right now they're the cooler, hipper program that, has kind of taken the edge from Texas.
Well, coming from a guy that loves tradition, loves the prestige and all of that, I think these two should play. Now, have I really missed the game? To be honest, I haven't. There are always other great games that are going to take its place. We move on. We move on from Notre Dame, Michigan. I would love to see those two on the field. They're going to be back on the field in a few years. But have I really missed it? No, there are great games every week. But if you look across the country, most of the in-state rivalries are forced by the conferences. Auburn, Alabama, Oregon, Oregon State. We could go through the list. But I love what the SEC and the ACC's done with Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, Kentucky, Louisville, Georgia, Georgia Tech. They play every year, even though they're outside of conferences. That has maintained as a rivalry between those teams. And also, you got Iowa, Iowa State to maintain their rivalry. So I would love to see these two get back on the field every year.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that either. And I mean, I think, you said you haven't really missed it. I tend to agree with you. But my one thing I would say is, we never got to see this rivalry with Kevin Sumlin there. And with, A&M, I'm trying to figure out how to put this nicely, but they had the same kind of coach for like 50 years. Like R.C. Slocum was ultimately the same guy that Mike Sherman was. And that, things just changed so quickly and in such a fun way when Kevin Sumlin came there. And so to me, it would have been fun to see this rivalry, but I agree. I hope there's a way they do it. And, I think Texas fans, again, misconstrued that. I wasn't saying that I don't want to see the game. I'm just saying that if I'm A&M, I don't really know what benefit it does other than to appease the fans. But you know what quickly does not appease the fans is losing football games. And so I hope to see it happen. I think it'd be great for the sport. I think it'd be great for Texas, obviously, for the two fan bases. But I just don't, at this point, I just think A&M has more maybe to lose than they do to gain by playing Texas.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that you make. The cool factor is definitely on the A&M side, even though the wins and losses are on the A&M side, but it's not a drastic difference. Texas is winning 6 or 7 games, and Texas A&M not exactly vying for national championships. They're playing okay. They had the one big year under Johnny Manziel, but it's been 3 things. It's SEC, it's Sumlin, it's Manziel. The SEC factor is not going to go away anytime soon, maybe never. Sumlin, as long as he stays cool and brings in top 5 recruiting classes, the Johnny Manziel factor may come back. It's probably a more lasting factor than anything we've seen outside of Tim Tebow in college football in forever. So Texas has some work to do.
And I was going to say the interesting thing about this, and I think the thing that's infuriating for Texas fans specifically, is that because A&M left, and they left on their own accord, and I think Texas fans are fair to say that maybe they left in part because they didn't feel like they could compete with Texas, because for however many years they really were the little brother, as you said earlier. But I think what's the interesting part is that it's almost like this catch me if you can kind of deal with A&M. Is like A&M has kind of jumped ahead, and as you said, they've kind of really regressed to the mean since Johnny Manziel, since his first year, and I guess it was the fall of 2012 when he lit the world on fire, won the Heisman Trophy. But it's funny because, Texas is making the same points you are. We're really not that far behind. The win-loss record really isn't that different, but A&M, the perception has swung so far that way, and Texas, there's nothing they can do to disprove it because – they can't play Texas A&M. And so I think that's the funny part about this situation is, like I said, it's like a catch me if you can thing. A&M kind of has this clout. Maybe if they played on the field, Texas would beat their brains in and, would win by 3 touchdowns, but there's no way for Texas to prove that. And right now, kind of A&M, like I said, they have that kind of public perception one up. And I think it frustrates Texas fans that they can't kind of get back on the other side of that coin.
Aaron Torres writes for Fox Sports. Check out this article on Texas-Texas A&M, the possible renewing of a rivalry on Outkick the coverage. Aaron, in the midst of talking and drudging through all this spring football and position battles and games that aren't really games that we've seen over the last few weeks, thanks so much for bringing a fresh topic to the board.
My pleasure, and I appreciate Kevin Sumlin and Charlie Strong doing the dirty work for me. All I had to do was kind of tee off once they got going, but as always, a pleasure, Mark.